Officer Tom Reynolds was infamous for his aggressive style of policing and his inability to truly connect with the community he was supposed to serve. Little did he realize that his deeply ingrained prejudices were about to be shaken in a way he never saw coming. It was a warm afternoon, the sun lazily dipping lower in the sky, casting a golden glow over the streets. Officer Reynolds was on his routine patrol, already in a foul mood after a long, exhausting day. He'd encountered what he considered troublemakers throughout his shift, and his patience had long run thin. As he cruised through a neighborhood labeled as high crime, he noticed a group of young men hanging out on the corner, chatting and laughing. Among them was David Carter, a respected leader in the community, and unbeknownst to Reynolds, the newly appointed chief of police. Reynolds slammed on the brakes, pulling over with his eyes narrowing as he sized up the group. "What are you monkeys doing here?" he barked, his voice dripping with disdain. The laughter from the young men ceased instantly, and the air went cold. David and his friends were in shock, unable to believe the words that had just been thrown at them. David, still stunned but steady, stepped forward, his voice thick with disbelief. "Excuse me?" he asked, locking eyes with the officer. "You can't talk to us like that." But Officer Reynolds wasn't backing down. "I don't need to explain myself to you," he sneered, his arrogance evident. "You're just another guy hanging out on the street." David's friends exchanged uneasy glances, sensing the tension that was rising with every word. They all knew David for his unwavering integrity and commitment to their community. But today, they were witnessing him standing up to an officer who didn't seem to understand the weight of his own words. David held his ground, a calm that only made his next question more piercing. "Do you have any idea who I am?" he asked, trying to keep his composure, despite the bubbling anger inside him. Reynolds scoffed. "Yeah, you're just some guy." He crossed his arms, dismissing David as if he were nothing. "What are you going to do about it?" David's gaze hardened, his mind made up. He had a duty to stand up for what was right. With a deep breath, he revealed the truth that would change everything. "I'm David Carter, the new chief of police," he said firmly. The words struck like a thunderclap. Reynolds's face drained of color as the realization hit him. The laughter that had once been directed at his group was now aimed at him. His colleagues, who had arrived on the scene, couldn't hold back their chuckles at his expense. Reynolds stammered, now vulnerable. "You're joking?" "No joke," David replied, standing tall, his voice unwavering. "And I won't tolerate this kind of behavior from anyone in my department or in our community." The shift in the atmosphere was palpable. What was once an edgy confrontation was now a moment of justice unfolding right before their eyes. David's friends, initially frozen in disbelief, now stood behind him, their expressions transitioning from shock to full support. David's voice rose with passion. "Do you think this is acceptable?" he demanded. "You've perpetuated hate and division with your words. This is not how we serve our community." Reynolds shifted uneasily under David's unwavering gaze. The weight of his actions, the disrespect not only to one person but to an entire community, began to sink in. A community that had fought for equality and respect for far too long. I'm sorry," Reynolds stammered, but the apology felt hollow, empty. The damage was already done, and the trust that had been broken couldn't be easily fixed. David took a step forward, his voice firm and commanding. "You need to understand that your words hold power, especially as an officer of the law. You're supposed to protect and serve everyone, not belittle them." As more officers arrived on the scene, they could sense the confusion and tension surrounding their colleagues' actions. Some cast disappointed looks at Reynolds, while others nodded in silent agreement with David's stance. "This is an opportunity for change," David declared to those gathered. "We need officers who reflect our community's values, officers who understand that our diversity is our strength." His words hung in the air, like a call to action, a call for growth and understanding. He turned back to Reynolds one final time, his eyes piercing. "I hope you take this lesson seriously, because if this continues, there will be consequences." As David walked away, his friends rallying behind him, Officer Reynolds stood frozen. His mind raced, trying to process the reality of what had just happened. In that moment of confrontation and revelation, a new chapter began for both men, one defined by accountability and growth for Reynolds, and one filled with hope and determination for David. As David stepped into his new role as chief of police, the community would never forget this day, not just because of what had happened, but for what it represented. It was a stand against racism, a commitment to building bridges, not walls. And as word of the confrontation spread throughout the city, many began to believe that real change was not just a distant dream, but a possibility that was finally within reach.